Hello and welcome to our webinar from RPA to AI agents, the shift in automation every leader needs to know. We are just about to go live in 1 minute, so just sit tight and hang on. Okay, let's get started. So welcome to our webinar. My name is Hannah Jetty, and I am a product marketing leader here at Semaphore AI. So in today's webinar, you can please jump in and ask questions throughout. You can use the comment section on the right to ask questions of our presenters. We'll be answering questions in real time during the presentation and at the Q&A at the end. Anything that we miss, we will try to get to you after, and we'll have some opportunities for you to reach out to our team afterwards as well to engage. We look forward to kind of chatting with you and engaging, making this a great real-time conversation. We will be sharing the recording and the presentations afterward via email. So stay tuned and you can share those with your colleagues as well. So let's jump into it. Like I said, today's topic is from RPA to AI agents, the shift in automation that every leader needs to know. I will be moderating today's discussion, but as you are here to hear from our co-founders, Rahim Venkatesh and Antti, they will be joining us and really leading the discussion. They'll be introducing themselves in a moment, but our agenda is the path from RP to AI agents. They'll talk a little bit about what the history is, how we got here, where both AI have been and where RPA has been. We'll see a demo and you'll get a sneak peek into our products and where things are going. And they'll talk a little bit about what are some use cases. So what to expect, what are some opportunities for you to start thinking about how AI can really start to add value in your organization, your enterprises. And then we'll do some Q&A. So like I said, start asking your questions in the comments and we'll take them as we go. And let's pass it over to you guys.
Cool. Thank you, Hannah. Hi, everyone. First off, thank you for joining us on this session today. We really appreciate it. My name is Rahim Venkatesh. I'm a co-founder here at Semaphore AI. Before Semaphore, my background is from enterprise software and database systems, most recently in the big data Hadoop Spark ecosystem. I was CTO of Cloudera before we launched Semaphore last year. I'd like to also introduce our co-founder, Antti, at this time. Antti, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ram. Hey, everyone. I'm Antti Karjalainen. I'm also a co-founder here at Semaphore. And previously to this, I started a company called Robocorp. I was CEO and founder of Robocorp from 2019 up until the beginning of this year when we merged the companies to form Semaphore and launched the company. So my background is pretty much, I've been involved in RPA since I think 2016. I kind of bumped into it first time in a big way, got really interested, sucked into RPA, and then started really deeply exploring RPA 2017, ended up starting a company around RPA in January 2019. So 5 years of company building around RPA, and a few years before that actually practicing RPA with the enterprise customers. So good background into this conversation. So of course, and so we're here to talk about how, in really practical terms, how the journey from RPA to AI agents is going to happen to a lot of enterprises, and kind of give you a perspective on how to think about this journey and why you should be thinking about it in the first place. So Ram, let's kick off the slides.
Let's jump right into it. And part of this is between Antti and I. We want to keep this conversational so that we have a dialogue going, and we really appreciate your comments and your ongoing feedback as well, so we can stop and take questions from topics that resonate with you or not. That'll make this more interactive for all of us. So Antti, to dive into it, right? So I think that there's been a lot of buzz around AI agents in the last year, and coming from that automation background, what's your perspective on how do you see these two worlds colliding, converging? Take us through that from your point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, if you jump to the next slide here, just contrasting the timelines. The years might not align perfectly, but we try to illustrate this here in like high level. So to me, RPA started in 2016. That was already when it was kind of coming up really fast. RPA was the fastest growing category in enterprise software at a time. And so pretty much every enterprise out there have implemented RPA in some way or form. And in the earlier days, 2016, 17, 18 onwards, it really started out with this record and playback. I think it was a big part of the low code, no code movement. There was this talk about citizen developers. You don't need to know any technical skills to be able to build RPA. And so that really got it started. And we saw this massive adoption through very low hanging use cases, doing screen scraping, browser automation, desktop automation based on record and playback scripts. But that proved out to be really useful to get kind of people thinking about automation. But then we evolved as an industry to more complex use cases, more richer, kind of bigger impact use cases. We started introducing things like OCR for documents. There's been a big wave of process mining, trying to find really impactful use cases for automation, and it has really evolved into this from from this a bot for every employee narrative into this sort of a center of excellence led professional automation category, where you see things like automation as code. And when we started Robocorp in the beginning, my vision was to build a open source framework and platform for code native automations. I saw that that's where the industry is going to be headed to eventually. The complexity of the use case was growing, so we wanted to build for that future state, and we got some success with that. We've been adopted by major enterprises globally, by Fortune 1000s around the world, and we saw the explosion in use cases. Many of our customers have hundreds of use cases in production all at once, and now kind of this shift towards more complex use cases, more professional development is ongoing. I mean, hyper automation, everything around that. At the same time, we saw, well, nobody really was paying attention in the automation world into the academic papers of the AI world back in those days. The attention paper, Attention is All You Need, came out in 2017, and that really led into the evolution or the invention of LLMs. And we got GPT-3 came out. That was my LLM moment. GPT-3 came out in 2022, and then, oh sorry, 2020, actually 2020 was GPT-3. We saw some really interesting stuff. It wasn't really ready for prime time. 22 was really the big year when ChatGPT came out, and it was a small innovation of user experience. Like, we actually persisted the whole conversation and allowed people to have conversations with the LLM instead of doing just prompting, uh, like without any context. And then last year, it was a big explosion after ChatGPT. We got all these RAG applications, question answering systems with GPT-4 and other LLMs providing much larger context windows. And now we, as an AI industry, as practitioners, we all kind of at the same time we're learning how to use these LLMs that were getting much more powerful in new ways, and tool calling emerged really last year as a big thing, and it's being put into use this year in the form of agents, and that's really how we see these two paths ultimately converging. There's so many use cases that we never could actually get to with RPA. There's much more demand for automation than we have been able to implement. So I think now with the convergence of these two paths, we're gonna see a sort of a new explosion going forward with growing appetite for automation.
Yeah, just to hit the elephant in the room, right? So do you think that now that Gen AI is here in all its glory, is RPA dead?
For sure not. No, RPA is not dead by any means. We'll go into details how RPA and AI agents play together in the later parts, but it's not. And this, if you need to insert data into a form 10,000 times a day or in your ERP system, don't do that with AI if it's predictable. Like, just do with RPA. There's ways to extend AI with RPA. and RPA has proven its value, I think, and it's about extending what use cases we can attack instead of saying that this thing didn't work. Now let's do this. It's I think there's so much more we can do.
Completely agree. I think that from a it's all about the use cases, really. It's about what customers want to do, and I think automation is such a big part of that narrative. And this comes up over and over in customer conversations. If you ask them, like, have you automated everything that you would want to automate? Predictably, the answer typically is never more than 10%. So most of what they want to automate, we still have to have efficient, proper, repeatable ways to automate. And I think that this convergence of RPA and Gen AI, as you're pointing out, the number of use cases continue to grow and grow. It's just the opportunities for automation, I think, that we can go after now. It's just the opposite. I think it's opening up what we can do with automation fundamentally.
Exactly, Ram. And as we go into the demo, we'll kind of show the different ways the agents are built versus how RPA is approached. So people will see that some use cases that you do with RPA might actually be much easier to pull off with agents, and some use cases that you think about doing with agents might actually be served with traditional automation. So let's go into, actually, we haven't really defined what is an agent. So let's get that out of the way first before we go into
completely. Yeah. By the way, there is a question. I'm watching the chat. Tarun, thank you for the question. It seems super topical. So we'll hit that, and then we'll jump into the question that Antti had. I think this is a topic that we've been deeply interested in, and we've had a bunch of customer conversations. We'd love to get your perspective too, as a practitioner in the field. Typically, what's been surprising for me, not being as heavily involved with automation in the past as Antti was, it looks like most customers acknowledge fairly candidly that they've been able to automate probably about 8, 9, 10% of what they wanted to automate. I think some of the really ambitious ones who started 5, 6 years ago, they probably got into 25% or so. That's kind of where I think the state of the art would be 8, and the outliers would be 25. And I think in terms of the opportunity we have in front of us, we think there's at least 5 or 6 times that set of use cases that we can now go after. And Antti, what would be your estimate for the same?
Yeah, I would go with that one. I think the aperture for automation is just growing with Gen AI. It's not that we have a fixed opportunity for automation that then we can take from 20% to 50%. It's actually that the whole set of opportunities is growing with AI.
Exactly. So let's dive into like what's an agent.
One LinkedIn user pointing out that the path convergence of these two technologies does not equal to architectural convergence, and that's a point that I've been making in my previous comments on LinkedIn. So I think that's maybe another webinar topic on its own. But let's get into the agent itself.
Yes, I think it's a good one though to definitely to hit. So let's start at the beginning, right? What is an agent? What's unique about it? If you cut through all of the hype, right? I think that what's exciting for us about the way we think about agentic automation as opposed to record and replay, it's really in the word agency, right? So the dictionary defines agency. It's the ability to take actions. It's the ability to choose what action to take to achieve a particular outcome. What's exciting is in the past, there's exactly been one system where you had agency, and that was with humans. Now with Gen AI, with AI in general, right, I think that we can now create software programs that have a limited amount of agency, but they can actually understand intent to achieve a particular outcome, come up with a particular plan or way that they are going to break down this task and say, here is how we are going to get from start to finish, and then go ahead and execute it. So for AI agents, clearly all AI agents are programs, but all programs are not agents, right? What is missing if you take like a Java program or a Python program or any other sort of imperative code that describes a particular process, it's fixed. The agency there was in the programmer's hands when they created that piece of code. At runtime, that piece of code is going to do the same thing every time. There's a lot of comfort that comes from that, and repeatability. We'll get into that later. But that's the main difference between sort of general purpose programs before agents and, or specific programs before agents, and what you can do with agency. And if you the next level down, for me, the three key building blocks here that help an agent be agentic is about reasoning, collaboration, and action. We'll go into each of these just a little bit here. So reasoning, this is the step where the agent is following a thought process to break down work into smaller subtasks and plans, right? So there's conventionally, you can also think of this, increasingly people use words like cognitive architecture and so on and so forth to describe this specific step in the agent process, okay? Things like chain of thought were an illustration of how you could do this with LLMs. Now that's sort of been expanded into reflect, act, and observe to see, but the agent says, here's what I'm going to do, here's what I did, and did I actually achieve the outcome that I was going to be after? Or plan and execute is another paradigm. These are all ways to express reasoning at the agentic level. Collaboration is, we're talking about tasks where the agent is going to be given a task, and it's likely that the agent's going to get stuck sometimes, and it's going to have to come back to the human and say, how should I proceed from this point on? Also, we believe that this is a team sport, so agents are going to have to collaborate with other agents to get work done. And this is all part of the kinds of use cases we're going after now. So this is a big departure from the RPA sort of unattended world, right? Let's replace this piece of work with a robot. That's not the agent way. The agent way is much, much more collaborative, much, much more interactive. And finally, you actually have to do things, right? Especially for people coming from the chatbot world. What's the difference between a chatbot and an agent? Is typically the agent has to interact with the context it's operating in for two primary reasons. One is to get information about the enterprise data, right? The questions that you want to answer about the business. And the second is to actually take outcomes in these underlying systems, so that, if you say that I'm going to onboard an employee, you actually have to onboard that employee by performing a set of actions in the context of the enterprise. So this is the sort of macro definition of an agent.
Yeah. So how would you, Ram, say, people know what it is like to interact with, let's say, ChatGPT? It oftentimes makes up stuff, and you don't necessarily know if it made up stuff or not. It's hallucinating. Yeah. So what makes an agent any better than that? Why can't an agent go off and start making up stuff and going into your systems and doing stuff that is not supposed to do?
Yeah, I think this is part of these are sort of core areas of research and innovation inside Semaphore also, right? I feel that there's a set of things that an agent can do, and then a set of things that an agent should do, and a set of things that an agent should not do. So if you think about the overall problem with Gen AI and hallucinational problem, is that that's kind of how autoregressive models work, right? If you take a large model like, say, GPT-4, it's trained on a vast amount of information. So it ends up creating two distinct feature sets. There is the element of natural language processing, which is where the LLMs excel at. They've never had the ability to program at the semantic layer the way we do today with LLMs and Gen AI. And agents definitely have to leverage that. Humans can routinely read a 2-line piece of email and understand its importance, its priority, the tone of the email, right? What needs to happen next? Should they ignore it or not? All of these come naturally to us. And that's the kind of natural language understanding that the LLMs are, for the first time, enabling us to take advantage of in the context of automation. Now, the other side is that since the LLM is trained on the world, it has a so-called model of the world. That, in most cases, is going to be wrong when it comes to automation inside an enterprise. A particular bank or a particular telco is going to have a very specific way that they work. It's going to require their processes. So the way you constrain that is to say, essentially, the reasoning step is something that we think has a very strong human in the loop component. It's also something that is super declarative. So you're not asking the LLM to come up with a plan out of its knowledge of the world. You're telling the LLM, here's a workflow or a job that's very, very specific. Typically, the kinds of tasks we are talking about here, they have like handbooks, run books, training manuals. Sometimes you even have to take an exam to demonstrate that you could do that flow. Those are the kinds of highly structured pieces of work that we want the agent to be aware of, build upon, and stay with it. Right? It's by establishing those kinds of guardrails that we can really go after much more well-specified work to avoid a lot of the problems with hallucination. But I think it's a really good question, and it's an important one, I think, to reconcile why we don't think that agentic automation is just going to be just give your question to the LLM in a chat and it's going to do the right thing automatically. That is not the same thing as agentic automation to me.
Yeah, and there's also a question in chat about a compliant approach to AI in regards to agents. I think some of these things that we believe in at Semaphore is we we never or very rarely allow the agent to actually generate code and go and execute it. There's some approaches where you come up with you have the agent actually program a function and they go and call it to get something happening in the real world. We always say that the actions that the agents execute has to be predefined. It has to be checked and vetted, and everything has to be logged and executed within the right access rights. That goes for both actions and data access itself. So it's a lot of guardrails and boundaries that we can put around the agent to make sure that it's doing exactly what it needs to be doing within the boundaries that it can work, and it doesn't do what we don't intend it to do. And it really goes back to what we ultimately want to achieve with these agents, which is completing a work product with the help of the agent. It, there's some startups, companies building these sort of general purpose agents that might be like a life helper or sidekick or whatever you want to call it, but that's not really the purpose of enterprise agents. If you go and still look back at the evolution, Ram, let's go to the next slide here. So evolution from RPA to intelligent agents to AI agents, we see that back to this, from going from tasks to processes to work, every agent is going to have a set of intents and outcomes, a work product that it completes. This also allows us to measure the effectiveness of the agent. So we really try to stay away from like loosely defined agents that are gonna do like half a dozen things for you really badly and then hallucinate the next six things that he can do for you. So that's really part of how we keep the agents on track and focus on the work that it has to do. And going into Ram explained here, you explained the sort of the run books, the guidelines, the user manuals that these agents will follow. Now, we in RPA we used to have a thing called process definition document. That was an artifact that was produced by the line of business experts, it was taken to the center of excellence, and that then translated that into RPA code, which meant that flow charts, very structured processes, working on structured data. We used to have certain input format that we expected the data to come in. Some of the workflows are very UI centric, sort of, large macros. That was the the kind of the if you wanted to be really nasty to your RPA vendor, you would call them supercharged macros. I was a RPA vendor, so I think I can make that statement there. I think RPA is much more than supercharged macros, because a lot of it was really at the end of the day, we really drove the biggest impacts with this sort of automation as code, which is this headless back office, unattended processes, and these would become really complex over time. And so actually what I feel is happening with agents is that we are taking this sort of very human-like, fluid, semi-structured or even unstructured process flows, taking in some unstructured data, and we can naturally turn that into automation and have a specific outcome that's driven by the agent. Still keep it sort of narrow enough, but within this like human-like boundaries. That's very natural for an agent to operate inside.
So Auntie, I think I'm going to call an audible. We should show something. Let's go to a demo, right, to make these concepts very clear for people.
Yes, let's do that. Jumping right in here, or actually, we'll show the demo flow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been talking about what is an agent, how they operate, what's the difference between RPA and agents for a while here. So instead of talking, let's just show it in action. And I have this very simple process. That the point here is not to show the most complex real-world enterprise agent. It is to show what's the difference between an agent and an RPA flow. Because a lot of the listeners here or the viewers here are going to be RPA practitioners. So I got, my colleague Tommy has built this thing that I'm using the demo right now, which is a very simple agent. It's a restaurant recommendation agent. So we were probably on a business trip together, and he was hungry, so he wanted to find some restaurants next to us, and he put this together. And so the process flow is super simple. First we define a city and a type of restaurant we want to find. Then we give that information to the agent, and the agent goes out to search for restaurants, and it has to find restaurants that match the specification, and then it has to fetch the menus, go on the websites of the restaurants, fetch the menus for those, and then use the menus to make recommendations based on I want to find like mid-range, mid-price food that's representative of the type of the restaurant. So that's really the only thing to it. But as we go through the actual demo, we're gonna see how agents are really different from how we actually build them, to how we interact with them, to how they actually can get work done. So I'll jump to my desktop here, and here we have a application. We call it the Semaphore Desktop, and it's something that we haven't released or announced yet, and so it's a sneak preview here. And here it's basically a line of business application that allows a business analyst to define agents, to build them, and run agents as well, and then obviously later manage those as well. But this is not for the developers. This is for the line of business analysts. And so I'll go here into my agents, and I have few here ready. So I have my restaurant assistant agent ready, and I'm just going to start a chat with it here. And before I start anything, start the conversation, we can take a look at the instruction set and what goes into this agent a bit. So first off, it has a few actions here. It has a search and browse package, which allows it to search the web, download files, get website contents, etc. Kind of the basic things that you would expect to do with the browser. And then my instruction set for the agents is pretty simple. I just wanted to ask me for the city and the food type, and then go and find these restaurants and get their menus and analyze it. There's no more instructions than this to the agent. So what I'll do is I'll tell to the agent that what I'll wanna have is I wanna have some Italian food. And okay, first off, we specified in the instruction set that we always need the city where we want to find the food from. So it asks me that before it can continue. And let's say I'm in Palo Alto now. So what I'll do is search for Palo Alto. And what's starting to happen here is that the agent conducted a web search. It finds 4 restaurants. And out of these 4 restaurants, it goes on their websites. Well, it first showed me the addresses and the phone numbers. They seem to be close by. And also now fetching the menus of each of them. So finding the website, going to the website, finding where the menu is, and then downloading the menu itself. And now it's making recommendations on some. Apparently, Terun has some mid-priced items, and lasagna looks good, rigatoni looks good. I could go and have any other interaction with the agent that I fancy. Maybe I have some sushi, but I think Italian sounds good. So if I just want to know, hey, how do I reserve a table? the agent has the context from the website, so it can point me to the reservation page. But so Ram, here, what we saw wasn't too spectacular, but if you're coming from a RPA background, doing something like this would actually require you to record a script that goes into Google search. That's fine, that's easy. Get the 4 results, still easy. Get the website context. Okay, where is the menu? Sometimes these restaurants will have a PDF menu. Sometimes it's right on the front page. Sometimes there might be multiple menu categories, and then break down the food items, compare them with each other, recommend a few, and then the follow-up questions are obviously something that's sort of a very typical what you can do with an agent. But when you go from this sort of very unpredictable data set that is the restaurant pages and finding the menus, that's really where it breaks down. But with a very simple agent, with just a few lines of instructions, it can actually perform that task very reliably. So this is something that's, whenever I talk with RPA practitioners and show this flow here, when they see what's happening with the agent, it sort of blows their mind a bit. And this sort of mind-blowing moments we keep seeing over and over again as we take these agents and bring them to customers and to actual business problems and solve them for them. And I think it's a very powerful model.
I completely agree. Now, this is a fun scenario, by the way. The first recommendation is one of my favorite places for Neapolitan pizza in the Bay Area. So we should do this the next time you are here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, let me make this demo boring now, right? So you can see what Antti showed you. The reasoning loop is pretty tight and it's pretty flexible, right? It's easy for us to start to equate to things like, oh, this is just like code and you're writing code in English. You're not. You're being intentional about what you want to have performed. And that is what the real focus is on the specification of what to do. The second piece was that he was demonstrating this core capability called function calling, right? And in this case, we chose to browse the web. There's authentication. There's his user profile. Typically, you're also potentially going after paywalled sites. You might be in the real world. This could be behind a site that requires 2-factor authentication. So there's a lot of flexibility in the tool calling. Elements of this are very similar to what we used to from the RPA world. What's different here is that the results of what's coming back from the tools are not interpreted by a program. They become part of the LLM's context so that the LLM can use its current context. And I think that if you combine that information with what was returned by the tool, that lets you then make a prediction or take the next action that you would want to take based on these two pieces of information. The third thing that he was showing you very casually was the ability to execute tools both sequentially, also in parallel. So there's a lot of flexibility in the kinds of function invocation and calling that would be possible using this agentic model. Finally, at the end of the day, we can be precise about the actions that you're going to take to actually achieve outcomes, right? So that's the way to think about, and we deliberately focus just on the reasoning loop in this demo, right? So we're just showing you sort of what's different. We left out the parts of what's same. What's same is that you don't expect that every interaction is going to be a chat. That's going to be triggers to say, I would like you to listen to this trigger on a file system or an event or like an inbox that shows up, and you can use that to kick off a particular stage in the processing. There's a full audit trail and a history. You're authenticated. We know who you are. Every step in this agentic workflow is recorded. You can look at the audit trail that you can look at to completely understand where something like this would fit in, right? And Antti, right on cue, I'm seeing that there's a lot of questions about what's the use case here? Are you going into the restaurant search business with Perplexity? The answer is hopefully no. So let's talk about what are the use cases here where this flow that we just showed you could be relevant.
We'll definitely cover some of the questions here in the Q&A. Things like, what about internal enterprise apps? How do we handle those? Now, of course, the agents will be able to go into pretty much any enterprise app and interact with them through APIs, through even user interfaces, do pretty much anything that a human could do on an application like you would expect in RPA. But what's different with agents is that we do that typically real time. So when you have a human waiting and interacting with the agent, that's happening real time interaction. That's actually something that we already started building towards at Robocorp to be able to facilitate that sort of smooth interaction with the agent and automation. But when we really think about agent use cases for the enterprise specifically, I like to think about going from sort of finding the first use case typically is the hardest one, because when you find the first one and show it to the users, you find the next dozen and the next dozen. It keeps expanding really nicely. But to any practitioner doing RPA, look really what you're doing with RPA today and what goes on before and after the RPA flows. That's really easy way to start expanding into what could be possible with agents. And we expect that the first use cases are rather tactical, and they are also internal use cases. Now, if you think about a typical enterprise, they really don't want to go and take the unnecessary risk of putting an agent in front of their customers in an interaction, even though customer service, customer support is one of the sort of commonly touted use cases of agents. I think that definitely has a lot of potential in there, but there's also a ton of risk. So you're putting the agent in front of your customer, or working together with a customer support agent who might or might not be a expert in anything that the agent actually can bring up to their screens. So what we recommend instead is starting from like internal back office facing use cases where the human in the loop for the agent is actually a subject matter expert that can evaluate the work of the agent, give it feedback, thumbs up, thumbs down, and help you improve the agent's workflow as you get more comfortable with these new technologies, and then build out from that. And over time, we expect these agents to go into more strategic use cases. So we might start from driving efficiencies, saving money from some functional area, or gaining efficiency there. But then over time, the expectation is that agents will go and really drive more strategic work outcomes, which are in the heart of the business itself. And really the greatest potential would be with something that actually allows you to create a new type of revenue stream with the help of agents. I've heard a few customers actually bring these forward with us already, but I can't unfortunately share them here. Maybe we'll have a future webinar on some of those use cases as well. And Ram, maybe you can talk to, there's a lot of co-pilots out there. Everything seems to have a co-pilot these days. So any comments on those?
Yeah, I would say, if you want to automate your own work as a business, agents can really be helpful. But if you want to automate somebody else's standard work, you might end up just doing something that they're going to come out with an agent for, whether it's Salesforce Genie or, some of the Microsoft Copilots for the specific systems, things of that nature. That's that middle bucket for us. We are saying, please don't automate somebody else's work. You should just be able to leverage those agents and interact and work with them and use them, right? But for the enterprise, I think the bottom of the pyramid, especially the question around data and custom. When we say context here, we're talking about data. And for agents, you need data from your structured data sources, your unstructured data sources, all the sources of data in your enterprise. If you need to have your work depend on this context, this is simple decisioning on custom context. That's the kind of use case that's what Antti called tactical. A lot of our customers, they want to start there. It's not that they are trying to do something different from RPA, but they understand that they can have a more flexible, more powerful automation for that layer, right? And you're just looking upstream and downstream of your current RPA solution. There's lots of opportunities to improve. The top of the pyramid, we think, is new. You can only go after this with agentic automation. That's kind of how I think about the difference between copilots and sort of the work that's intrinsic to the company. right? And keeping with the use case theme, if you think of it from an adoption standpoint, there's really, what's I think unique about the way companies are approaching AI agents as opposed to the previous wave is really, we're seeing this as a partnership both between the line of business as well as the technology, right? So this could be the CTO, it could be other parts of like empowered IT who are leading the charge on the AI front from a technology standpoint. But this is really one where we are seeing both of these two constituents come together. The main reason for that, I think, is AI is a strategic conversation.
Sorry, Ram, to jump in, but
Yeah.
you said that AI is strategic. So are you saying that there's not going to be shadow AI this time around? We show a lot of shadow IT happening.
Exactly.
In the world. Just get some licenses in, something on the desktop. Maybe that'll grow.
Yeah, I think previous experiments with adopting cloud, adopting RPA has really taught the business. I think that this is shadow AI would be dangerous, right? Because your exposure to governance, to privacy, to risk, not to mention cost, that'll always be a consideration. But all of those things are really things that people want to be like super intentional about. But I think the other part is this is a strategic conversation, not a tactical one, right? Because they see this as they're not going to just implement use cases in one department or one function and then call it good. Your entire business over time is going to be able to take advantage of AI and be transformed in ways that can affect both your top line and your bottom line. So I think it's that strategic focus, which is why we're seeing that there's good air cover and support from both of these constituencies, which then means as they go on this journey, the LOB journey is the one that's like really interesting for me as a technology practitioner, right? It's about, I think there's been a lot of experimentation, use case identification. Most of the conversations that we have, they know there's not one use case. There's like a couple dozen that they have real good line of sight to. This year is all about meaningful business outcome from the first set of these use cases. I think in reality, the number of enterprise agent use cases deployed last year would have been 0. And this year is when we are seeing the first wave of these agentic deployments. And I think both the LOB and the technical side are learning how to get this into production, how to address enterprise concerns. Data comes up so often in these conversations because I think data is just so integral to the AI story. Having a reliable agent, of course, you need to have reliable, trustworthy, clean, secure data, and that's table stakes for building such a use case out. And as the LOB starts to salivate about the adjacent use cases and how you could actually have more of these in production, from a technology standpoint, we're starting to get the questions like, okay, now I'm going to go deploy this. And again, there's lessons from deployments in the past that people want to start from. So they want to know, how do I do some of these things centrally from a risk and a cost governance and things of that nature? Right? So that's kind of what we see as what we're seeing from the first set of customer deployments that we are in. And if you sit at the macro and look at what are the kinds of things that an enterprise agent stack is going to require, right? These are some topics that come to mind. There's a lot of these, and in interest of time, I'm not going to go to every one of them. Antti, would you like to talk about the command and control piece, especially as it relates to control room for us?
Yeah, I think I'm already looking at the questions on the side here. There's a lot of them coming in, but I think companies, enterprises are thinking about this pretty smart, pretty smart way where they really don't want to go and acquire one agent. They want to acquire the capability to be able to build, run, and manage a lot of these. And it's the expectation that we're gonna have this agentic capability brought in as an enterprise level capability. And there, I think really the ability to be able to centrally control, manage, orchestrate, and monitor these agents will be key. There's going to be a function that owns the agent control room, and they are in charge of reporting the outcomes, collecting how many times each business stakeholder has interacted with the agents, how many work products have we been able to complete, what's the savings, what's the impact, and then of course monitoring centrally Do we need to update any connectors if there's any errors, if the agent goes off the rails and there's bad feedback from the users, and then taking that back and further improving the performance of these agents. So it's really a centrally managed enterprise capability that will be built around these agent platforms the way we see it, and that has happened in previous industries that are quite similar. So I would say we'll wrap up here. We won't go through every bullet point on the list, but let's instead go to the Q&A section.
Sounds good. Actually, Hannah, shall I turn this over to you so we can just go through the questions sequentially? Yeah.
Let's take a quick look at some questions. And also, as a quick reminder, I put in the chat, and if you want to go quickly to the QR code, we have some links. So for those of you who are excited to see our new desktop in action, you can get on the wait list today. So on the left, you'll see a QR code to our blog, or I don't click a link to the URL. If you go to the blog, you can see a little bit more about, learn more about how we're thinking about agents, learn more about cognitive architectures, hear more about the shift from automation to AI. And on the right, you'll see a link to the waitlist, so you can be the first to hear about our desktop when it does come out. We're really excited about that. I saw some questions about when. Next month. So stay tuned, watch your email. We're really excited. I think there's going to be some great templates in there, and hopefully you can find your own restaurants when it does come out and build your own agent to do that and more. Let's take a look at the questions. There's some great stuff in there. Okay, so let's start at the top. So how is this different from ChatGPT Builder provided by OpenAI?
Do you want to take that, Ram?
Sure, happy to. So I think, there's a few things. I feel like all of us really benefited from ChatGPT and GPT-4 coming out, and that really opened the eye to what's possible with Gen AI. I think ChatGPT Builder, custom GPTs, these are all been ways for people to customize the chat experience with some function calling and invocation, right? So for generally speaking, at the macro level, functionally, there are things that you can do there that potentially you could accomplish through a variety of different means, including agents. What's different about what we are contemplating here and showing you here is that these are with full line of sight to your own enterprise data and taking actions against your own backend systems, and with the ability to also be flexible about which LLM you are going to use. Right? OpenAI is a vertically integrated stack where if that's the deployment architecture of choice for you, you can do certain things with them. We provide the ability to leverage OpenAI's LLMs in our architecture for agents, but we also anticipate, like on the last slide, LLM pluggability is a key part. The reason for that sometimes is customers want to run these LLMs completely in a way that's on their approved list or in the approved way that they want to run it. Secondly, we believe that access to your own data requires a different way of thinking about what is the LLM responsible for and what is it not. Right? Fundamentally, we believe that enterprise agents, to get the kind of reliability we're talking about here, we skipped over more boring parts like atomicity and repeatability and being able to roll back and being able to guarantee execution happens all or nothing. These are the kinds of things that we don't think an LLM should be in charge for, whereas an automation approach, this is an important part of providing all of those guarantees. So that's how functionally it's very, very different from asking a chatbot that may or may not do what you want it to do.
No, that makes sense. I see a few questions about the RPA and AI alignment, right? So Is this just RPA and AI? How can RPA be improved with agents? How can you create RPA and agent copilots in one? Just a few questions here. Any kind of feedback?
Yeah. So here we are taking a complete different approach than with RPA. It's not that we are infusing RPA automations with LLM reasoning. We are actually using the agent itself to drive the the automation, the workflow forward within the guardrails that we provide and with the tools and the data access that we provided. So it's fundamentally not a RPA process as such, but the agent can actually call into RPA processes. So we know that there's a lot of companies with a lot of investment into RPA platforms, including Robocop. And so what we want to do is enable those to be leveraged inside the agents. The difference between the type of actions that we typically do within our own systems would be that they are really fast, low latency, can react to a request in milliseconds, whereas an RPA process is not fundamentally designed to do that. So it might take seconds or tens of seconds to load up and then execute, and it might crunch through a dozen work items and then return those back. So that requires a asynchronous way to be able to call into that process. But that's something that we are building into our product, the ability to be able to dispatch work from an agent into the background and then return it back to the agent for continuing the work when it comes through. So, but yeah, totally different way of orchestrating the actual automation, the way the agents do it.
Correct.
That makes sense. I think that takes us to a question from Rajesh on LinkedIn. So he says, the problem I have with agentic is we see simple fun demos, but never an enterprise use case. Can we take an RPA process that's been running for years in an enterprise and make AI agents do the same without RPA?
Yeah, good question. My first intuition as an RPA practitioner is if it's running for years, let it be. No need to basically implement the same thing in agents again. But yes, we are actually in the Ram. Maybe you talk about use cases here more specifically, but we have a good population of real world use cases that are gonna go to production soon enough, but they are not just in the stage where we can publicly talk about them. But wait a few months more, and then we are in a place where we can start exposing people to like what did company X do with agents, and that's I think ultimately what'll start a flywheel here going.
Okay, completely agree. I think, in fact, think of this as, and it's for us, this is really valuable to know that the questions that you have around applicability and use cases, this is kind of what we have focused on pretty deeply. I think I can hit the other question too, Hannah, if you're okay with. There's a question about talking a little bit about the deployment. So essentially what we have done is we are doing a series of fairly deep engagements with a small set of design partners. Right? This is something that we have been involved in with some of them for more than a few months at this point in time. So we went through the use case identification and the requirements that came out of it. A lot of what we showed you today is sort of from that work that's happened with our initial set of customers. And there, the main insights that we are learning just as hard as they are through this process, right? I think it's the excitement that we see in the line of business around how they are in control of the use case much more than they ever have been. I think that's been sort of the biggest eye opener for us, and it's influenced a lot of our thinking that building and authoring are both important parts of this process of thinking about agents, right? And once the line of business user is able to see, for example, we are doing use cases where at a glance you would say, of course, RPA could do this casually, right? Things like, invoice reconciliation. This pattern shows up over and over again where they have unstructured information in a PDF invoice. They have authoritative information in 6 backend systems. They need to go match up everything, and that's how people get paid. Very established flow. Every customer we speak with has 6 variations of what makes this easy or hard in their particular business. But if you really unpack that, I think that it's the unstructured document understanding and the flexibility in reasoning is what makes this a task that humans are able to casually do, not casually, sometimes with great effort do. And it's really hard to write a program that has to be changed tomorrow because the PDF format changed ever so slightly. So it's that flexibility and resilience to change that's an important element of the use case that's coming up. And Auntie says, not to be coy, but we will definitely be going through these in subsequent webinars with you, we get a chance to talk more about
yes,
this.
and maybe talking about some of our own use cases, how we use agents ourselves. We've been building agents for our own usage. Things like when we develop software, we need to pull in a new open source package. We have an agent to do the diligence for us, searching for various things like license information, usage patterns, all that, and offloading that work from us. One thing that I think is really interesting to me as a long time RPA practitioner, when I've observed people actually implementing new agent use cases, our own HR agent that was just developed recently for onboarding employees. Now, our HR manager, Nea, actually authored the instruction set, the runbook for that agent. And we had some connections that weren't available still in our stack or in our gallery of actions. So we had to develop those few integrations against a few APIs on HR system. But it was our engineers who built the connectors, but it was our HR who was in charge of the agent itself. And in RPA, we used to have the HR be maybe interviewed, maybe videotaped, doing something on their screen, and then it would be turned over to the RPA developers to turn into a PDD, maybe validate back and forth. Is it what you want to have done, and then go and program. Whereas here, the HR manager is in charge of defining the flow of the agent, the work of the agent, and then we just put in the connectors and it works. So I think there is that direct connection with the work product and the instructions of the agent that's so magical that gets me super excited about the future possibilities of agents. Maybe we have one more question, or do we? Hannah, you're the time.
Yeah, we have time for one more question. So let's see. So you're now searching on publicly available data. Is the same possible for internal data sets with fully proprietary company data sources in a fully offline mode?
Short answer, yes. And it's a play in three apps. Is you need to have, we don't believe that you're going to be able to teach an LLM how to learn about language by looking at your company's data. You don't need to. So think of the language processing piece alone as being the domain of the LLM. You can pick an LLM that has been further fine-tuned for your industry. We see some of this in like pharma and healthcare in particular. So you can bring that kind of an LLM into the mix, right? The second piece is your own enterprise data, your own documents, your own structured data. Typically, structured data is not a good data set to train LLMs on, but it's great for answering questions that come out of the LLM. That's kind of how we use it. This is the opposite of RAG, right? So think of this as the agents are able to take questions that need to be answered both during the planning process and the execution process, and then go answer them against the systems of record that you have. And this information, then your source data sources are never exposed directly to an LLM in this architecture. So you can get that isolation you're looking for. Same with unstructured documents. We definitely promise we'll do a good overview just of the data abilities of the agent that are implied here subsequently. Okay.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Everyone that was on today's webinar, you will get an email with more information in the early access link. And like I said, next month, you will get access to desktop and learn more about all these capabilities Ram just mentioned. Any final parting words, Antti and Ram, for our audience?
No, we really appreciate the engagement today. And I think we have to have a mechanism to address some of these questions offline. But even before we get there, stay tuned for that. And thank you for participating today.
Yeah, thank you everyone for participating, for the great questions. Too many questions to answer today. So we'll need to schedule for the next webinar to go deeper into some of these topics.
Yeah, this is only the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.